Hello again. Welcome back to part 2 of the Professor's Lab game mechanics specifically related questions. Let's jump into it, shall we? Logan wants to know, how is Pokemon progression handled? I know evolution is achievement based, but do a Pokemon's stats and HP scale off of EXP? Sort of. Yes and no, as is the answer for a lot of these. Most of the time, when a Pokemon levels up, they roll a hit die to boost their max hit points, but rarely do their stats increase as a result of something like this. Instead, they usually get boosted through a specific training or effort that the team member and the trainer have worked on for a while. So it's pretty rare that like you just level up and then out of nowhere like your strength buffs, but it does happen. It's just rare. Logan also wants to know, are you ever going to do deep dives into Pokedex entries and studies on new Pokemon or moves? For example, Titania, Aquafang, etc. I mean, maybe. It's entirely possible. My gut reaction is to say that a Pokedex deep dive series would be cool, but here's how I would frame it. It would be much more fun if the players wanted to do that as a character arc, and I wouldn't want to take that from them. So it's not something that you'll see an NPC working on and making like substantial progress, because again, it's a pretty Herculean task. But obviously you have people like Professor Redwood, who is currently placing all of his research into a database right now. So it is happening, but you probably won't see a deep dive from just me. It would be way more fun to me if a player wanted to do that, so I wouldn't want to steal their thunder in advance. So probably leave that open, but it is a cool idea. Moving on, Professor Finalia of Neverland Pokemon Center. Do you have a setup or notes that we fellow D&D players can follow or use to make our own Pokemon D&D campaign? Can't help but feel inspired by your series to make my own. So do you have any tips on creating your world and the system you use to create your Pokemon? I talk about this a lot in the prior video, and a lot of you have very similar questions on like, do I have a thing that we could just release that you could have? And as much as I wish the answer was like, absolutely, yes, here it is, I don't. There really isn't a system that the TOTS runs on. It's Pokemon 5th edition. That's all it is. It's 5th edition D&D. If you have a player's handbook and a DM's guide from that, you will have everything I had when we started this. How to make the Pokemon, stuff like that. That is a very personal thing that I feel like any aspiring Pokemon DM should go through. You should make your Pokedex. It's a very important aspect of it. It's all the creatures that you'll be seeing, and my power level will be different from yours. So while I heavily encourage you to do that, I wish I had better answers for these questions, but I don't have like a campaign module for how you could run this game. I really, like, it would be cool. It would be very, very cool, and maybe someday we'll get like licensed and it'll be really fun. But until then, all I can do is offer you a little bit of praise and like a push of like, go do it. Like it's really, really fun. And it's a super awesome experience, but my process for building a world might not help you. And I've talked about it in the last one as well, but we did a whole world building series on Twitch a few months back. The VODs are up on this channel right now. We'll probably be diving back into those a little bit later on. Right now, focus is on obviously the Q&A, but stay tuned for that. Moving on, Mega Master. How do you keep everything organized? Each Pokemon has their own page. What system do you use to manage them? I don't keep anything organized. I wish I did. I am horrible at organizing anything, including, but not limited to, the D&D campaign, this Q&A. It's all a mess. So, every Pokemon does have their own page, yes. The players have access to an incredibly awesome Google Sheet that someday Joel and I will do a sort of guided tour of for you guys. He is a whiz kid at setting up Excel spreadsheets. So Google Sheets is amazing because now I have the entire campaign is basically logged into this giant multiple page Google Sheet that does math for us in combats. It tracks the weather in the game. It's really, really helpful. It's super cool, and it's just a couple formulas. So Joel and I someday will walk you through that. It'll be really cool when Joel has time. Again, when Joel has time. So stay tuned for that, but don't hold your breath. Mr. Omega 565. When you make a Pokemon, do you do just the form the party is encountering, or do you do the whole line? For example, when Violet was caught, did you just have Ladybug done, or did you go ahead and make Lady in 2? Prior to starting recording, I had pre-made about 200 Pokemon. In no particular order, but I did start in Gen 2 with the ones we would need. So obviously, like, Koa was made because I needed, a Rockruff. So, started in Gen 2, start from the beginning, go all the way down, generated all of them in a vacuum with no testing. Realized very quickly that that was going to be a bad idea, so I stopped at 200. So there's a reason that for about, I don't know, maybe 65, 70 sessions, you very rarely see anything outside of like Gen 2 or Gen 1. I have since, in this hiatus that we've been taking, I am currently revamping the entire thing, all of it. Which is kind of a bummer because I'm not going to be able to use any of it in the TOTS game anyway, but I'm just doing it kind of to keep the brain focused for the future. But oh my word, the short answer for your question is I make the whole line at a time because you scale one off the other. If I'm not sure how to make the prior evolution form, but I know how I want to do the secondary, then I do the secondary first and then cut everything down. So you just kind of scale it back. That's worked for me. But again, anybody looking to run a Pokemon DnD game, I know Devin probably deals with this a lot as well. I am more than happy to like offer you advice on how to do it. But if I just send you like the Pokedex I use to run the game, it might not work in your game if your power level is different or if your expectations aren't what mine are, and it's super unlikely to be as helpful as you think it would be. But it's a really, really useful exercise if you're going to run your own game. Make your own Pokemon. I encourage you to do this. It's really, really fun. It's a lot of work, but it's fun and it's super useful. Once it's done, you can use it forever. So go for it. Please, I encourage you. Moving on down the line. Egghead. So TLDR, you inspired me to start my own Pokemon DnD campaign. Do it. Important note, I have never DM'd or played D&D up until starting this campaign. That's okay. That said, it's going to be okay, I think. The players enjoy it and so do I, so hey, doing something right, that's awesome. My question is, do you have any advice, just generally speaking, for a rookie DM? Ways to tie stories together, how to effectively manage time writing, tips, or overcoming writer's block. Creating fun and challenging but not impossible boss and gym battles. Any advice would be great. Thanks in advance. Love what y'all do. We love you, Egghead. And I'm glad to hear that it's going well. That tells me that you're doing everything right. If you and the players are having fun, don't change anything. That's first and foremost, that's it. There's no better way to learn what works for you and your game than trial and error. I can give you all of the advice in the world, but until you like sit down and start running, you're not going to figure out what you like and what your players want. Your players will be very different from mine. My players are very different from each other and to me. So it's been this like endless gumbo of just throwing in what everybody wants to see and trying to balance that time. But I will attempt to throw some advice at a couple of your questions. So I did write some stuff down, so I'm going to be glancing a lot more than usual. Apologies for that. Here's some advice that I can give you. Keep your plot easy to remember. Not necessarily simple, just easy to remember. What do the bad guys want and how are they going to get it? That's very simple. Your players are the monkey wrench for that plan. Think of it that way. If your villains are always doing something, then your world is alive. And that's perfect. That's the best way to start. So keep your plot easy to remember. Know what people are doing at any given time. The rest will fall in line. There's nothing wrong with a straightforward adventure because it gets you started. So if the quest is as easy as like, hey, I need you to go find this Voltorb out in the woods, now you've got the players going out. And if a couple things happen along the way and they want to investigate those, there's your adventure. They found it for you. So definitely do that. Writer's block. Oh boy, that's a really personal thing to overcome. I have had writer's block more than a few times in this campaign, and I think it shows. But the best advice I can give you, go watch or play something that inspires you, is fun, and has nothing to do with the D&D world that you should be building and working on. My advice when you have writer's block is procrastinate. Go do something else. Just walk away, pick someone's brain about it. My dad is an excellent wall to bounce ideas off of, because if I'm stuck and I don't know what would be cool, he is a perfect third-party observer who has played in the game, but doesn't really keep up with what the tots are doing under traditional circumstances. So I can walk up to him out of nowhere, go, hey, let's go to lunch, bounce ideas off him for, an hour. And by the end of that, he'll have come at it in a different way than I did. So he'll see things from an outside perspective, and he'll point out, well, obvious thing is obvious that you just didn't see because you wrote it. So that's a great way. Just find somebody you can talk to that can get it around it. Otherwise, just go do something else for a while. Listen to some music that you like and just get your brain thinking in a different way. How to make a fun or challenging boss fight or gym battle. Again, that's a very, very personal thing for you to do. I like to challenge the players rather than the characters and the things on their character sheets. Make them think of a way out of a situation that you came up with. Don't bother coming up with a solution for your question. Let them do it. Give them the effort. They are the ones that need to solve the puzzle. Even if they don't have all the pieces yet, they can start to figure out how it fits together. And worst case scenario, if they come up with something that's cooler than what you came up with, run with it. There's nothing wrong with that. I do it all the time. That's my best advice. Have the players take some of that pressure off of you. But continue to have fun with your game. That's important. You need to have fun too. DM Burnout is a killer of campaigns that are really fun. So make sure that you're enjoying it. Moving on down. So many of you asked this. Lucas, Bookworm, and D-Swag all asked some variation on, do you guys plan on having more contests in the Discord for a chance to have a creation in the game? I understand we still haven't seen all the winners from the art contest, but I think minor character settings items would breed a lot of interest and talent. Further extrapolating down to maybe even a Patreon level cheaper than the $100 character creation to make a shop name, an item, or something like that. If we do another contest, it will not be until we see all of the entries fully displayed, for the same reason that we shut down the $100 Patreon tier until we got everybody in. If we bring either of those two things back, we've learned a whole awful lot about what is required, how to go about it. We had some folks in the $100 Patreon tier that waited 3 years for their $100 to come to fruition. And it just felt wrong, but I didn't want to rush things. Because if I rush them into the game and they just get left behind immediately because we didn't take the time to fully develop them or they didn't come up at the right time, it would have cheapened the experience. So if we do bring the Patreon tiers back, it'll probably be in a lesser... It's definitely going to be less money, and it will be a less involved thing on behalf of the patrons. Because I also can't warn the patrons that their NPCs are coming up too far in advance, because if something horrible is going on present day, but where we've recorded to, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, we're about to run into your NPC, what do you want him to be like? Just out of the blue. It's a little awkward. So whether or not we'd see the Patreon tier come back, it would definitely be different. As for the art contest, the Tots and I have had a lot of conversations on how we would do that in the future. And we will likely do another one, but I wouldn't bet on it, but I also wouldn't say it's never going to happen. So I'm going to file that again in never say never, but don't hold your breath. Moving on down, D-Swag had another question. Would you ever run a different kind of game on the side like Ragnarok or anything different, especially with this hiatus? So a little bit of behind the scenes. That world building series was in service of a game that we were going to do in this hiatus period. But the situation has changed to such a point that we are not able to do that. It's nobody's fault. It's nobody's problem. It's just not going to happen. So we've put that on hold. We will probably run the War of the Architects in some way somewhere down the line because I like the story. The players liked their characters that they came up with. It will probably happen, but you won't see it in this sort of break time. You won't see it. It's not going to happen. It's not going to run concurrent with the TOTS because I have a lot of ideas I want to try for that, and it's going to take so much time and effort. I don't want to take time away from the TOTS, and I also don't want to just run it for the sake of running that and have it be like an improv mishmash and also kind of a mess. So I would love to run something else like Ragnarok. We will almost certainly do it in some context down the line, but you won't see it in this little break. Wookie! The Wookie wants to know, do the characters have classes or special features, or do you plan on adding classes or special features to the characters? Stay tuned. The key word you are looking for is when the TOTS have downtime. Things will be happening. Pressing on, Z, the Elemental King. With the gyms that have been failed at, will there be special episodes on the ones who need those badges going back and getting them, like when D was first introduced to the series with his gym battles? Or will it be more like a gift from the gym leaders for something they did, like with Xantha? So let me get out ahead of this, because a couple of you have a similar question. If the players ever want to go back and redo a gym that they have failed, so Portelo, Wadalonga, etc., or what could have happened with Xantha, and I'll cover that in a second. It's likely that the session will just be them fighting the gym leader. Because at this point, specifically for Portelo, I and everybody else has seen everybody go through that gym for like, I don't know, 40 hours after it was all cut together. If we do that, it'll probably just be them fighting the gym leader. Whether or not I make them fight everybody all the way up to it, that'll probably be a thing. But the only thing you guys will probably see of it is the gym leader. I might put it to a poll when it comes down to that. Again, it comes down to whether or not the players want to do that. Now, Xantha has been a question that came up a lot, and I feel bad because, yes, it did kind of steal Milo's redemption arc. So allow me to explain. The reason Jax gave out badges to D and Milo was because there is no Xantha gym anymore. It's not functional. Most of Xantha is gone. I will cover this a lot more in the story plot questions as we get closer to there, because that's where a lot of these ended up. But this one seemed a little more mechanically based and kind of a how do you make the show type deal. Jax knew he was never going to get his rematch with Milo and was never going to get to challenge this D person that was helping him. So it was kind of a case of open at the end of the world. If you solve this like world-ending catastrophe that nobody else can deal with, you've more than earned this, because that means you obviously could have defeated me in a battle if you defeat the thing that crushed me. So you probably won't see that ever again in this campaign, barring some sort of world-ending catastrophe again. But the reason they got the Xantha Gym badge in the way they did was because things played out the way that they did. Joshua, what are some Pokemon that you have given the players that you chose to change because you thought they were far too weak or strong, and how did you change them? How do you deal with Pokemon that are babies like Titania or Pontiki? So Shirley and Riot are the two examples, one where they got changed immensely, and Riot where they didn't get changed at all. So Shirley was way too good, and I didn't realize that when it was designed in a vacuum until we fought it for like 3 hours. And that was an issue. So now Shirley went from if you don't kill me, I take 1 damage to if you don't kill me, I take half. Riot's ability has just been simplified from roll a die to determine what stat you steal to you steal their constitution so that your ability is more likely to go off. Because it was very complicated. It's hard to remember how you do it. How do you deal with Pokemon that are babies like Titania and Pontiki? We just do. Pontiki is one of the strongest Pokemon on the team, and Titania is definitely growing into her own. Carrying on through, Matty Cake. We've seen the Darwin's Finch-like Pokemon that I think I talked about in the last one, maybe the one before, that have adapted to their environment. Will we see a sort of hybrid or mutated Pokemon, aka a fusion? A fusion in that sense of, I think, like the Pokemon Fusions website, highly unlikely. As for a hybrid Pokemon, they were a prominent force in the background plot that we never touched on in Ragnarok. Cue my undead smiley boys from the endgame. But both of these are unlikely to be seen in the TOTS game. because the themes required for that don't quite fit with how we like the tots to play out. So you probably won't see that. Moving on, you also want to know, have you ever considered running patron-only one-shot campaigns set in the Laris region? Campaign? No. One-shot? Maybe. Let me explain. It's something I've definitely thought about, but I have a huge mental block for running a game for people that are paying for the service of having a game run. It's not that I think it wouldn't do well or that it wouldn't be fun. I would feel a weird amount of pressure to make sure things go a certain way if somebody was in a Patreon tier that got to play in a game that I was running. So that feels weird to me. That's just a weird problem up top. So there's not a whole lot I can really do to change that. It might happen, but I'm also much more a fan of running face-to-face with people that I know can work well together, and I lose both of those things if I just throw a bunch of patrons in a game. I like to make sure that the party will get along. Carrying on, Timothy the Titan, welcome back. When Nubster was learning Ice Beam, you mentioned that getting a critical hit was the first step to learning it. Does learning new moves also work by a milestone system? If so, is it similar to evolution? Yes. Yes to all counts. New moves have a series of milestones required. A critical success is the one that the players have done enough that I feel comfortable with them knowing that, yes, that's the first step. Usually when they critically succeed on the move or the check required to make the move, they no longer need to make a check to do the move if they had to. Obviously, the requirements change based on what they're trying to do, what Pokemon they are, what move it is. Could they learn it normally? Is it a huge leap for them to learn this move? But yeah, I love making them solve a puzzle without any of the pieces. But absolutely, it's a milestone system. And Brent K, how do you level up the Pokemon? Is it like D&D up to level 20 or more Pokemon style to level 100? It's neither and it's both. Usually when the players do something really significant in the world, or a Pokemon last hits a boss or, does something super incredible and amazing, they get a little boost to their stats in the form of a level up. A lot of these happen when we are making the weaker Pokemon stronger, or the stronger Pokemon a little bit stronger, just a skosh. They usually get a little boost to their stats. We have never officially tracked levels in the campaign. I think past session 8 or something is the last time that gets mentioned. It's been a background force. I kept track of it for a while, and then by the time we were dealing with 30 Pokemon, it was too much to keep track of, and now there are 58. So I gave up on that. Similar deal to a couple of the questions before, and then the last video, and in the future ones. Devin and I have been picking each other's brains for how the games worked. Leveling up is a huge system that he interfaces with a lot, and I do not. So I have been picking his brain on that, and we've been kind of going back and forth and doing all this stuff to kind of make a mishmash super fun system that we might use someday. So at least for the tots, you'll probably never see Crash is level 36, whatever. You probably won't see stuff like that for the tots. In a future game, maybe. If there is a future game, you might see that. But that brings us to the end of this. The second and last one for now. I think I got the last of the mechanics ones in here. If not, we'll do another one. But so ends another episode of the Professor's Lab. I do sincerely hope that you've enjoyed, and hopefully these answers were satisfactory for you. Again, as always, feel free to drop more comments, clarifications in the comment section below. If they weren't being part of a future video, I'll throw them in there. And if not, I'll try to just tag them in the comments, answer them. But thank you very much. Auf Wiedersehen! We'll see you in the next lab.